とにかくこの部屋は警察が来るまでこのままにして施錠します。いいですね。
Natsu announced it as though she didn't care whether they agreed or not. If anyone had the right to object, it would have been George. But he looked as though he'd shed enough tears. George nodded slightly, still facing away from the others. And when he stood up, everyone else agreed too. Natsu still hadn't opened that western envelope of the family hat that she picked up. But now that they decided to leave this room, she decided to unseal it in the parlor, where everyone could watch. Alright, well, at this point, it seems that we're gonna have to go at this from a completely different angle. We will have to focus on this murder now, even if the previous one is still not solved. And I guess through each murder we will gain bits and pieces of information that will help us in solving the overall mystery. In similar fashion to the Cyclops serial killings a while ago. And that being said, yeah, we have a locked room murder now. Not my first rodeo, gotta say. I mean, there are a couple of possibilities to take into consideration over here. I thought of some possibilities up until now. So the first possibility would be that Eva and Hideyoshi killed themselves. For what reason? I have no clue. For what reason would they kill themselves? I don't know. Another possibility would be that, well, one of the remaining 10 people, the culprit, used some hidden trapdoor or escape passageway to enter, kill Eva and Hideyoshi, and then leave. It's kind of like, it is like what we discussed before about Kinzo's disappearance, although everybody is saying that there are no hidden trapdoors. Another possibility would be that the culprit committed the crime and then locked the room through some form of mechanism that they created, whatever that would be, like from the outside of the room. This would be the case if the door was not locked with a chain before, which, I don't know. I mean, I am more in favor of the possibility that the door was already locked with a chain from before. I mean, it is a bigger possibility because Eva and Hideyoshi were making sure the criminal would not get in. They did say that they were going to lock themselves in as well. In which case, the culprit killed them from outside, either through the gap of the door or from the window. And I can't say that killing them through the gap of the door would be possible. I mean, we do know that Natsu has her hunting rifle, so there's also the possibility that there are more guns in this mansion. But to kill them from far away, especially with Hideyoshi in the bathroom, all dead, it's highly improbable. That, and even if we are talking about somebody shooting Hideyoshi and Eva in the head with a weapon of some sorts, they still had to go inside and stab them in the head to hide the gunshot of some sort. So yeah, no matter how we think of it, it definitely has to be that the culprits definitely entered inside somehow, but I'm not sure how. I mean, there's also... Okay, I am forgetting one possibility over here that I was thinking of that might help this other possibility. It is that a killer was inside this room, like, already. Like, in similar fashion to what we discussed before when it came to Kinza's disappearance. The culprit was already inside, whether it was the culprit that locked the room, or Eva and Hideyoshi themselves locking the room to protect themselves. In which case, the culprit needed some place to hide. They could have hid under the bed to kill Eva and Hideyoshi, and I guess hid themselves near the door for them to escape after Kanon and Kumasawa entered the room. Although that surely would have been a risky move once again, because everybody came in after Kumasawa and Kanon, so the culprit had a short window there. That, or there's also this possibility that Beatrice was the killer, teleported inside the room, and then step, Eva Hideyoshi, and then teleported away. It's not like anything can stop her. As soon as they walked out into the hallway to head back to the parlor, somebody immediately felt something out of place, or maybe sensed something strange. Hmm?
マリアもわかるかこりゃ何の匂いだよひでえ匂いだぜ
When everyone sniffed the air, they did notice a horrible burnt smell drifting through the hallway. One that none of them had smelled until then.
私、ちょっと厨房を見てきます。火はちゃんと消したはずなんですよ。
After noticing a burnt smell, it wasn't sure that Kumasawa, who had just been using the burner in the kitchen, suspected that her own slip-up had caused it. Kumasawa hastily dashed away.
カノン、熊沢と行きなさい。一人にさせないように。
Yeah.
はい
After nodding at Genji's order, Kanon followed after her. He wasn't running, but as he followed her, he tried to search for the cause of the smell in other directions as well.
臭い
これは確かに鼻が曲がりそうな匂いですね。しかし換気のために窓を開けてもいいものか。
Natsuki was reluctant to open the windows in a situation where self-defense was so important.
換気扇を回させましょう。窓を開ける必要はないと思います。
ジョージの兄貴、話しかけても大丈夫かよ。犯人を探す相談なら構わないよ。
It seemed that George had managed to climb out of the abyss of sorrow. All that filled his chest now was a quiet flame of hatred towards the culprit, who had stolen the lives of the one he loved, and his beloved parents.
部屋にはチェーンがかかってた。さっき構造を見たが、とても外から細工できる代物じゃねえ。つまり、完璧な密室だったってことだ。そうなるね。バラ庭園の倉庫の時は、シャッターの鍵を使用人室からこっそりと持ち出したのだろうとか、あるいは複製の鍵を持っていた可能性とか、いくつか方法が想像できた。でも、チェーンは違う。チェーンは一般に浸透した施錠方法の中で、最もシンプルに密室を構築できる。
チェーンだけは物理的に破壊しない限り外からはどうにもならないぜ。じゃあつまり犯人は扉からは出入りしなかったってことなのか。
こりゃ面白いや。つい数時間ほど前にも扉以外でどうやって部屋から出入りしたのかってみんなで騒いだ気がするぜ。
Back then, we were all losing our cool, wondering how grandfather had disappeared from his room. The receipt that was stuck in the door on a whim proved that the door had remained sealed. And since Natsuki was the only person to enter or exit during that time, she was under suspicion. Eva proposed a theory about how Natsuki might have thrown grandfather out the window and left by the door herself. But this door is much simpler. It was sealed from inside by the door chain. The window had also been locked from the inside, and the bodies had been inside the room. The window was also locked, you say? This time it really had been, without exaggeration, a true closed room. That's right. If you include grandfather's disappearance, 3 cases have occurred, and all 3 times the door has been the point of interest. The First was the shutter. There was a key in the servant room, and if we assume someone knew about that, this can't really be called a closed room. The next was the door sealed by the receipt. However, Natsuki entered that room. So if grandfather had left through the window or been thrown out, she would have been able to lock the window before escaping. Or, like my theory, grandfather could have hidden until the receipt was gone and left the room later. Basically, this door can be defeated with a handful of its desperate tricks. In that sense, you really can't call this one a closed room either. And now, we have the door sealed with a door chain. Finally, we have to give up. The window, the door, everything had been locked. It was a perfect closed room. The first hadn't been a closed room because everyone could be suspected. The second hadn't been a closed room because Natsuki could be suspected. But this time, no one can be suspected. Truly, it is hard to suspect the 10 remaining people at this point. Cause, well, we do know that Natsuki and the 4 cousins were in the parlor, so they are out for sure. Nanjo, Kumasawa, and Kanon were always in the kitchen before Genji and Kanon decided to go to Eva and Hideyoshi's room. So, with that being said, who can we even have on the list of suspects to begin with? Kenzo, Beatrice, or Genji, who we don't really know where he went until he came to the parlor to tell Natsuki and the rest that the dinner is prepared. That or, again, with that possibility that Eva and Hideyoshi killed themselves for some unknown reason. Which doesn't really make sense. This was a perfect closed room, because the door chain formed a seal that blocked everyone equally well.
なら、犯人は室内に入らずに犯行に及んだ。
Huh. Maybe.
部屋の外から何らかの方法で。
確かにチェーンである以上、人が通れるほどは開けなくても多少の隙間を開けることができる。ノックして顔を覗かせたところを襲うとか。いや、甘いか。
甘いよな。エヴァおばさんの遺体が扉のすぐそばだったならそれも考えたぜ。だがエヴァおばさんは部屋の奥のベッドの上、しかも秀吉おじさんはバスルームだった。チェーンの隙間からでは姿を見ることもできねえし、手を伸ばすこともできねえ。ちくしょう、全然ダメだぜ。さっぱりだ。
Something was tugging softly at my sleeve. It was Maria.
おお、満足？
満足って何がだよ。
バトラは親族の誰かを疑うのが嫌だから、犯人はベアトリーチェであってほしいと願ったよ。だからベアトリーチェは叶えた。バトラが言った通り、絶対に人間には無理なことをして、バトラに魔女の存在を信じさせてくれた。なのにわがまま。
Alright. Enough with your kihihis and mwahahas, Maria. You're gonna have some explaining to do here. I tapped Maria, who was laughing unpleasantly, on the head with my fist.
ああ、叶えてくれてありがとうよ。今のはその礼と、不謹慎な時に笑ったことへの教育的指導だ。それより教えやがれ。エヴァおばさんたちの部屋の扉にも また怪しげな落書きがされていた。あれもまた魔法陣なのか。
あれは特に覚えやすい特徴的な形なんだから、あのくらい知っててほしいね。あいて。
知らねえから花を持たせてやってんだ。ごちゃごちゃ言わねえで解説しろい。
バトラは暴力的だね。あんまり意地悪すると教えないよ。あいたい。言うよこのげんこつ男。
Yeah, you know, at this point we're perfectly fine with bopping you in the head, as punishment for your bad attitude over here. Violence or physical abuse is never the answer, unless it's done in a cartoonish way. Now tell us what the magic scribbling means, or you are gonna get a karate chop.
あれは月の1の魔法陣だよ。
何の意味がある。その魔法陣のご利益は。書かれてるヘブライ語の意味は。
記されているのは旧約聖書詩編第107編の16節。主は聖堂の扉を破り、鉄の栓抜きを打ち破ってくださいました。魔法陣の効用は2つ。一つはいかなる方法によって閉ざされた扉でも開くことができる。
Really now?
そりゃ便利な魔法だぜ。つまり魔法の力に頼らなきゃ開けぬ密室の扉っていう魔女様のアピールってわけか。もう一つの効用は。
開かぬ扉を八方塞がりの事態に見立て扉を開く。難解な事態の時に用いることで、それまで思いつきもしなかった解決策を与えてくれるんだよ。平たく言うと、観察力や洞察力、ひらめきや直感を授けてくれるんだね。ベアトリーチェはバトラごとき人間風情に、この扉の開き方がわかるものかって挑発してるんだよ。
Didn't you say that Beatrice had a demon she could use to get her to any location she wants? The demon called Gop? In which case, why the need for this magic scribbling in the first place? Not to mention that when we discovered that the door was locked and that we couldn't hear Eva or Hideyoshi inside at first, the scribbling was not there. In fact, from the time Kano left to get the cutters, till him coming back, a maximum of 5 minutes passed. You mean to tell me that Beatrice did kill both in that time span and did this scribbling? Which would mean that Eva and Hideyoshi were still alive before that, when Kanon and Genji yelled after them. Yeah, you know what? I think that you're lying about something over here. You're being a bad girl here, Beatrice. Don't forget about the karate chop.
よーし、もう黙れご苦労。上等だぜ。その魔女の挑戦、受けてやら。
Yeah. Bring it on. I'm already sensing the contradictions around here.
マリアちゃん、この世に魔女も悪魔も存在しない。父さんと母さんは誰かが殺した。それが僕のよく知る人間なのか知らない人間なのかはわからない。でもそのどちらであっても必ず人間なんだ。
しかしどうやって。せいぜい10センチ程度しか開かない扉の隙間からどうやったら室内の2人を。
それにしても耐え難い匂いです。一体何事なのですか。
Kanano Kumasawa, I had gone on ahead. realized the smell wasn't coming from the kitchen even before they arrived there. That was because they noticed an even thicker wave of stench rising from the stairs leading to the basement, which they passed on their way to the kitchen.
ボイラー室。
またボイラーの調子が悪いんでしょうか。
Those stairs led to the underground boiler room. The mansion's boiler was old and in poor condition. Both of them had witnessed problems with the boiler on several occasions, but they had never smelled the boiler belching out a stench like this before. The thing they heard from the basement was definitely the sound of a door closing. Masao had phrased it as a question, but she already knew it couldn't be anything else. Masao was so surprised at the sound that her knees gave away yet again, and she cowered. After all, at that very moment, no one could have been in the boiler room. Just a few seconds ago, everyone had been crowded together around Eva and Hideyoshi's room. So who caused the sound of a door closing just now?
Kanon-san!
After taking a second to sort out the situation, Kanon ran down towards the basement. Since they heard the sound of a door closing just now, and there was no sign of anyone coming up the stairs, the person who closed the door had to be inside the boiler room now. If the boiler room had been a dead end, Kanon wouldn't have rushed in so hastily. But Kanon was a servant, so he knew. There were two entrances to the boiler room, one that opened to the mansion and the one that opened to the courtyard. If it didn't chase them now, they might slip away. Masao reached the same conclusion long after Kanon did. But she couldn't let him go alone. If the thing in the boiler room was a culprit, an opponent who had easily killed 6 adults in the first murder, then no matter how Kanon confronted them, he wouldn't be a match. Of course, with this argument, even if Kumasawa joined him, he wouldn't change a thing. At any rate, after a delay, Kumasawa decided that she mustn't let Kanon go alone, and she rushed down the stairs. At that time, Kanon was already in the boiler room. The boiler room's characteristic damp heat tormented him. It had always been an unpleasantly smell and hot place. On top of that, the room was full of that horrible stench, which made Kanon feel like he was going to be sick. There was no doubt that discern was the source. In that case, Kanon should have been searching for where the smell was coming from. However, Kanon kept gazing straight forward, as he grabbed a hatchet from a tool shelf just off the side of the door. He hadn't stretched out his hand because he'd wanted a hatchet. He had wanted to grab a weapon. Any weapon. Why? Kanon gazed into the darkness where the naked light bulb couldn't pierce. Then, he answered.
ルーレットは数字と赤黒にかけて配当を競い合う。だが赤か黒かのようなリスクの低い賭けはその程度の配当しか与えられない。
The words coming from Kanon's mouth were swallowed up by the darkness. That darkness suddenly started to swirl, glittering. It was such a fantastical scene. Golden sparkling butterflies that hid in the shadows all over the boiler room flapped their wings, twinkling beautifully, and gathered in the darkness, disappearing. Kanon continued speaking, directing his words at the darkness as it swallowed the butterflies up. But as the butterflies gathered in the darkness, they they would certainly laugh. Kanon continued to speak without faltering in the slightest.
逆により的中率の低いかけ方をすればそのリスクに比例した配当が与えられる。親方様は天文学的なリスクを的中できることを奇跡と呼び、その結果得られる天文学的な配当を魔法と呼んでいた。親方様とお前がどんな魔法を求めてルーレットに挑んでいるのか、そんなことには興味ない。しかしお前は忘れている。ルーレットには赤でも黒でもない目が出うることを忘れている。
Roulette has a special pocket called Zero, which means that the house takes everything in certain variants of the game. This means that all the coins bet on the table will be swept up, just as though everyone has forfeit.
僕は一つだけ心に決めていた。もしシャノンが殺されて僕が生き残るようなことがあったなら、この身を投げ出してお前のルーレットを全て台無しにしてやろうと。これは親方様が決めたルールでも、ましてやお前がこのルールは僕が作った。僕はもう家具じゃない。お前のルーレットのゼロなんだ。
Kano's face twisted with humiliation. It was clear that his defiance against his own weaknesses was being ridiculed somehow. Kano's brow creased even further, and a fierce expression that he had never shown to anyone appeared on his face. The hand grasping the hatchet was shaking. His sweat became drops, which slid downward. It was clear that the emotion causing Kano's hand to shake wasn't just anger. However, Kanon suppressed that emotion.
僕はもうお前の言葉に惑わされたりはしない。悪魔のルーレットはこれでおしまいだ。地獄にてさらに1000年、次の召喚者を待つがいい。ベアトリーチェ!
When Kano raised the hatchet and tried to dive into darkness, the darkness definitely sneered. Oh God! It sneered at that courage as if it were vulgar, lazy, futile, and meaningless. Kanon, his hatchet still held aloft. Couldn't take another step after that. With a clang, the hatchet that he'd been grasping fell and rolled on the floor. Oh God! Kanon! Falling down with a pair of thuds. Kanon's knees hit, left, then right. That hand, which looked like it was trying to catch the sky and know that the hatchet had been dropped, gradually lowered, landing on his chest. Then, the other hand did the same. Right there, a handle with a demon-shaped design was buried into his chest. The same type of weapon that had been stabbed into Eva and Hideyoshi's foreheads was in Kanon's chest. Kano was curled up in anguish, fresh blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. Kanon! It was makeup too extreme for Kanon's white skin. Around this scene, the glittering gold butterflies danced through the darkness, mesmerizing. It was a beautiful, beautiful dance. A funeral march of tribute, ridicule, and contempt for a single boy's self-sacrifice. Canon had already been prepared for his own death, but although he could do nothing but accept the death he had received, he attempted one last measure of resistance. He grasped the handle of the weapon sticking into his chest with both hands, and gritting his teeth with an acute, unearthly pain, he pulled it out. For only a moment, a bright red spray gushed out. Come on, Canon. There's not a time for you to die. Not yet! It made an unpleasant plop sound. Probably resembled the sound of Canon's soul as it was sucked into the swamp of the dead.
Canon-san? 誰か
Kumasawa screamed at the incomprehensible sight in front of her. Kano was lying in a pool of blood. Kumasawa's heart was a complete mess. He wouldn't have... What a horrible fate. He wouldn't have been killed if I had been with him. What an incredible luck. If I had been with him, I might have been killed too. As she screamed, her expression was filled with complete confusion, and all the muscles of her face were pulled up, almost as though she was smiling while crying. But no one could have made fun of an expression like this.
何事ですか、熊沢。返事をしなさい、熊沢。
The first one to dash in was Natsuki, holding the rifle. The other and Genji dashed in after her. Normally, they probably would have started discussing the origin of that violent stench filling the boiler room. But after they saw Kanon, who was lying on the ground as if he were drowning in an ocean of his own blood, the stench wasn't important anymore.
Kanon! 返事をしなさい。源氏、南條先生をここに。
Natsuki realized that even though Kanon was on the verge of death, he was still conscious, so she sent Genji to get the doctor. Natsuki, holding the rifle aloft, faced the darkness in the center of the boiler room and shouted.
そこに隠れているものは何者です。おとなしく出てきなさい。そちらから出てこないなら容赦なく撃ちます。
ライトだ。おばさん、照らすぜ。
Beller, thinking quickly, took a large flashlight from the tool shelf alongside the door and used this light to cut through the darkness Natsuki was glaring into. The light only shone on the mechanical-looking piping at the door. The door had been left open a small crack, and it was obvious that someone had left through there in a hurry.
夏日おばさん、あの扉はどこへ？
源氏、あの扉はどこに通じているのですか？
中庭です。
逃がすかよ。くそこの野郎。
Beller let out a war cry as he slammed into the door. Cool air from outside suddenly rushed in. There were some thinner off stairs leading up. Beller ran up them, shouting.
待ちなさい、バトラ君。一人では危険です。
Natsuki was also rushing up the stairs, chasing after Beller. They were in the courtyard. The courtyard of the mansion had been built strictly for lighting purposes, so it wasn't a very elegant place. Because it was surrounded on all sides, the air was calm and completely undisturbed, even though they could hear the sound of strong winds. There was only the gentle, sorrowful rain. As he ran through the cold and scattered raindrops, dashing up the stairs into the courtyard, Beller looked in every direction. Oh, God damn it. Of course, the odds of him finding a suspicious silhouette just standing around nonchalantly were pretty much zero. Beller spun, looking all around. He turned again and again. He kept spitting until he almost lost his sense of direction. He prayed that he would see the culprit somewhere in the scenery. There was no chance. God damn it. They got away again. All he saw as he spun was more and more dimensions, heartless walls and windows. Furthermore, there were 2 entrances in the dimension from the courtyard, and neither of them were locked. Because the courtyard couldn't be entered from outside the dimension, the doors had been built without locks. He didn't know which one they had left through. He had to give up. Battler pounded the wall with his fist, swearing.
バトラ君、一人で先走ってはダメです。バトラ君。
Battler pressed his forehead against the wall, which he scratched at with his fingernails as he cried.
畜生畜生畜生ヘバおばさんに秀吉おじさん、さらにカノン君かよ。6人も殺しやがった。飽き足らずさらに3人も殺しやがった。ふざけるなふざけるな。エヴァおばさんも秀吉おじさんも昔からいつも優しくしてくれる愉快なおばさんたちだったじゃねえかよ。カノン君とは昨日会ったばかりだが、きっとこれから仲良くなれたと思うぜ。なんで殺したんだ。どうしてどうして。人ってのはな、殺しちまったらな、二度と生き返らねえんだぞ。タケノコみてえにひょいひょい生えてきちゃ来ねえんだぞ。どうして殺すんだよ。どうしてどうして。
Battler was a boy who could understand the feelings of pain and regret in a person's heart. So he cried, with all his strength. Natty, who had always thought of Battler as a frank person, was a little surprised to find he had this delicate side. And at the same time, she understood how easily hurt the heart of a young person could be. So she held him.
大丈夫です。
God. This is turning really bad really fast. I mean, why canon? Now out of all things. I mean, this isn't even the order of the epitaph. This is turning into a massacre at this point.
あなたもジョージ君もマリアちゃんもジェシカも私が絶対に守ります。母として、そして後宮家の代表として。
Battler, after sobbing into Nancy's chest for a while, wiped his tears with a bitter smile, as though he had been like that the whole time, and tried to appear as though he had cried more than enough already.
とにかく一度下に戻りましょう。犯人を探すより自分たちの身を守る方が最優先です。明日になれば船が来る。そうすれば警察がやってきて全てを白日のもとにさらし出してくれるでしょう。犯人がどうあがこうともこの島から逃げられるものですか。
Right.
そうっすね。警察さえ来れば。
When the Seagulls cry, the crime will be solved. But for some reason, Battler felt a slight sense of uneasiness, as if the Seagulls would never cry again. That couldn't be true. When the typhoon passes, surely the lively seagulls will return to the harbor again. I returned to the boiler room along with Naonazi and told everyone weekly that we hadn't found anything. We heard that Dr. Nanjo and George Aniki had carried Kanan-kun to the servant room. The servant room had a first aid kit and a sink, and could apparently function as a nurse's office. Komasawa and Jisukai had accompanied them. Stains from Kanan-kun's blood remained on the floor. Judging by the large amount of blood lost and the ruthless shape of the weapon that had fallen carelessly to the ground, I figured that Dr. Nanjo's treatment would probably end in vain. That weapon was doubtlessly the same type that had been stuck in Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi's foreheads. Alright, well, I really do have to wonder what is even with this weapon in the first place. It really does seem that our killer has a lot of these with them to use on people, to murder them. But wait, isn't the demonic design on the handle a little different? There seem to be some small differences in that part. Still, as far as their overall shape was concerned, the weapons were all the same type. Though it had seemed brutal, they left the weapons stuck into Aunt Eva and Haku Hideyoshi to preserve the crime scene. So this was the first time we were able to have a perfect view of the entire weapon. As we'd expected, the weapon was not bladed like a knife, but shaped like an ice pick, or rather, a thin stake. And it had a spiral-shaped pattern, sort of like a drill. It looked like something that might have been driven into the hearts of human sacrifices in some demonic ritual. Including the handle, it was 25 centimeters long. Half of that was the stake-shaped part, which was stained with deep red blood. The length of the blood-stained part made it clear just how deeply it must have penetrated into Kanan-kun's chest. But Onati and the rest didn't even look at the weapon, and instead stood in front of the incinerator, where the horrible stench was emanating from. They must have dragged it out. Dragged out that thing which had been burning in the furnace. It was still smoldering and kept sending out dense waves of that awful, unpleasant smell. Genji-san and Maria stared down at it. And Hate probably couldn't stand to look directly at it. She kept shaking her head, her back to it. I thought nothing could surprise me after everything that's happened, but this. Stood there for a while, moaning, with a rise urge to vomit. The true source of that unearthly stench was a scorched corpse that had been cooking inside the incinerator. No. Could this be Kinzo? The clothes, the surface of the body, and the hair were all hideously burned. Their grotesque corpses in a state where not the face, nor the age, nor even the gender could be guessed at. Jesus. When I had thought about it calmly, I realized that a corpse appearing at this time could only be one person. It was grandfather, who had disappeared that morning, and whose whereabouts had been unknown.
おそらく親方様だと思います。
私も同感です。このようなお姿でお亡くなりになるとは。
This isn't even part of the epitaph. Could it be that the same that tried to kill Kano here also killed Kinzo by burning them inside the boiler? Or we're talking about somebody else who is not following the epitaph?
おいたわしや。
でも この死体、本当にじい様だって保証はあるんすか？こうも黒焦げじゃ性別さえも想像つかないってのに。
バトラ君、足をご覧なさい。
Oh, Nazi, with her handkerchief over her mouth and her eyes averted, pointed and told me to look at the burned corpse's feet.
両足の指が6本あるのがお分かりになりませんか？
Six toes?
あ、本当だ。
Just as Genji-san had said, there were 6 toes on each foot. Each individual toe had looked so normal in its line that I had noticed.
親方様はお生まれの時から両足の指がそれぞれ6本でした。そして故に親方様は後宮家の再興を託されたのです。
後宮家には昔から生まれつき多子症の方が多かったそうです。多分遺伝的なものでしょう。
Polydactyly literally means many fingers. Because of the little mistake by God when a person is born, one of their toes or fingers splits into 2, and the total number increases. But a big deal isn't usually made of polydactyly in the world at large. And that's because it isn't a disease, just something people are born with. So, while they are still babies, at about the time they turn 1 year old, they can be taken to the hospital and given surgery to make them normal. Even a child with polydactyly can be treated before they become aware, so they might not even remember it themselves. By the way, isn't there's a possibility for this to occur in 1 out of every 2,000 babies? So, even though it's not usually seen, it isn't that rare at all. Speaking of which, I think Uncle Hideyoshi mentioned something to me a long time ago. Something about how even Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man who unified Japan at the end of the Sengoku period, had 6 fingers on one hand. According to Natsuki, among the many Ushiromiya family heads, the ones most praised for their wisdom all had polydactyly. Because that, when grandfather was born, his relatives were all excited at the thought of that he might become another wise leader. And when the leading relatives all died in the Great Kanto earthquake, it was apparently argued that grandfather should be the one to restore the family, because of the auspicious sign of his birth. Grandfather hadn't disliked his position as the head so much. This 6th toe probably would have been pretty lucky for her. Come to think of it, I've heard about some country where it's believed people with polydactyly should be treated as gods and revered. This is beside the point. But it's fairly common in mystery novels for a corpse to be burned to hide its identity. But I guess that in grandfather's case, just toasting him wouldn't be enough. And grandfather's body was not simply burned. It was just like Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi. I think that had been stabbed into Kanon-kun's chest. One of those demon ice picks was stuck into his forehead. Huh. Okay, well, Kanon is still not dead. There's still hope that he might survive this, if we treat him. But even so, he got hit in the chest. And Kinzo burned in the incinerator, with a weapon resembling an ice pick sticking out of his forehead. The old sorcerer's wish vanished before it could be granted. He always knew that this was one possible result of his risky gamble. So this one is part of the epitaph too at this point. The 4th Twilight and the 5th Twilight. Gouge the head and kill. Gouge the chest and kill. We jumped straight to 4th and 5th Twilights. But what about the third one, though?
Yubi ni Toshi no yubiwa ga arimasen.
昨夜の手紙の通りということですか。お父様、さぞやご無念でしょう。
Natsuki-san let her head droop and close her eyes tightly. This room had also become a vital crime scene for us to hand over to the police. It was decided that we would leave grandfather's corpse here and look to lock the room, sealing it. It isn't clear when grandfather's corpse started burning in the incinerator, since, according to Genji, the strength of the flames hadn't been that strong. The body must have started burning a long time ago, so that stench could possibly creep out of the furnace and fill the room by bit, eventually pouring out and climbing up the staircase. In which case, it surely must have been a long time ago. Putting aside whether he was a rare or well done, grandfather had been brought out, killed, and burned, even though he had started out locked away in the closed room created by his auto-lock. There's probably no doubting this. However, according to Genji-san, the boiler room is usually locked. The possibility that someone outside our group had snuck in and committed a crime was overwhelmingly high. And there was also a good chance that this person was walking around with something like a master key. After all, the doors and windows throughout the mansion had been checked. But despite that, the culprit was able to strut around the mansion freely. Does this crime confirm that the 19th person exists? There's still that contradiction, since they're trying to tout their existence without ever showing themselves once. Along with Kirie-san's chessboard theory, I've been using this contradiction to deny the existence of a 19th person. By spinning the chessboard around once more, the very fact that this crime makes it perfectly obvious that a 19th person exists means that the existence of the 19th person is even less plausible. As long as that 19th person doesn't show themselves in front of us. I don't want to dismiss any possibilities here, but with all this happening, it really makes me question how in the world any of the remaining survivors could have done all this. Or, once again, a chain reaction of killers. Even then, I have no evidence for that sort of theory. I mean, what the hell is this? Is it mind control? Is somebody capable of switching between bodies? Could it be that Beatrice is possessing all the family members and servants and made them kill each other? Huh. The culprit could get grandfather out through the door sealed by the receipt. They could kill Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi from the other side of the door sealed by a chain. And could they possibly go so far as to create a fictional 19th person through strange tricks and devices? I still want to believe the culprit is among the 18. Then the list of suspects has grown very short. The four of us kids, all Nazi, Genji-san, Kumasawa Ba-chan, and Dr. Nanjo. One of these people has to be the culprit. Wait, we can't be sure of that. Just a second ago, we started doubting whether the corpse here was actually grandfather's, right? Maybe we can think of the other bodies in the same way. For example, the first 6 all had their faces horribly smashed. Some of the bodies had kept enough of their faces for us to confirm who they were. But that old bastard, for example, had lost his entire face, as though the whole thing had been neatly peeled off. We only figured out which body was which by their clothes and surroundings. Did the culprit prepare a fake body beforehand and alter it to make it look like they're dead, even though they were actually hiding somewhere after committing the crime? It may sound ridiculous, but it wouldn't be an impossible trick to pull off. It's too early to give in to this person, to 19th person. No, the switch.
マリアちゃん、それ以上しげしげと見てはなりません。さあ、バトラ君も。カノンの容体も気になりますし、いつまでもこのようなところにはいられません。戻りましょう。
Maria didn't go out with everyone else, but remained in the boiler room. The thing she was staring so fixedly at probably wasn't grandfather's body, but the demon's ice pick sticking out of his forehead. It was probably the sort of item that an enthusiast couldn't bear to ignore. I tapped her on the head.
おい、マリア。ベアトリーチェの目的は何なんだ？